With that said, like I said, we're dealing with all Yonkers today. We have another Yonkers candidate, and people always say, "Oh, you don't have no Republicans on there." Once we've had several, we've had and Lorraine being our resident Republican, always tries to, oh, we got to get more Republicans on. So she actually introduced me to who you were. And we had our photographer come through and take pictures, and
that
we
was definitely a blessing. I appreciate you guys.
Shout to Shane! I've not shouted him out. We have a new photographer, Shane Samuels, who is holding it down. Another Yonkers. He lives in Yonkers now. He's making us look good. He covered your election, your campaign, your fundraiser. He covered your competitions fundraiser. He covered Andre Wallace's golf outing and several other events that Shane, I'm still waiting for pictures on so we can get them in the paper. But if you're listening, with that said, Lorraine, introduce our next guest.
Oh, we have Joe Pinion here, who's running for Shelley Myers' former seat at the Assembly. Is it what district
is
it?
So it's the 90th district.
90th district.
Running for all the people of Yonkers. So.
Well, first off and foremost, we have to give you official people before politics welcome. There you go.
But I think that
I want to ask you a question first that has nothing to do. Do you write? Are you a writer? No, because I would love. I've been looking for somebody that I can get. I want a piece for Black Westchester, being Black and Republican in Westchester County.
I would
love that perspective.
Be more than happy.
Okay, I want that. So
he made me too.
We'll talk offline.
Absolutely. So, welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
I think the district covers more than just Yonkers, right?
No, so it's one of the few districts, one of actually 5 districts outside of New York City in the state that are self-contained in one municipality. So our campaign is Believe in Yonkers, because again, it's no matter what part of Yonkers you live in, people in Albany can't draw a line on the map to determine where opportunity ends and where despair begins. And so here, we're trying to make sure that we're understanding that yes, I'm running to be the assembly person for the 90th district, which is about 75% of Yonkers. But really, let's be very clear that the issues that affect the southwest portion of Yonkers are very much entwined with the things that are affecting the opportunity for people living in the northeast. And so again, we're running under a One Yonkers banner, a Believe in Yonkers banner, to understand that it's time for the people of Yonkers to choose themselves.
Before we go, I stand corrected, and I always say I don't know everything, and when somebody points it out, I said Andre Rainey, who was the youngest mayor. I also said he was the first Black mayor. I have been corrected by Oscar Davis that Richard E. Jackson Jr. was actually the first Black mayor of Peekskill. So I stand corrected officially, and apologize to the fans and the supporters of Richard E. Jackson. But go ahead. I just wanted to make that correction.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. So why are you running? Who are you? Wait, Bob.
Yeah, before we continue.
Bob.
Before we even
continue.
Bob.
That's Dr. Bob.
Before we even continue.
Okay.
I feel obligated. Quite honestly, I have to say it's a pleasure and a privilege in many respects to have this brother as a guest in our studio, because when I initially saw him enter the studio, I thought I recognized him, and indeed I did a very quick search, and this brother has I know him because I've seen him on CNN. I see him on CNN all the time. He's actually a national commentator, and I think it's worth pointing out because one of the things that impressed me about the discussions that you've been involved with on CNN and other national news networks is the seriousness with which you have been able to lay out a Republican or conservative position to support a lot of the policies that you've been advocating.
Well,
and I do want to say that because I was quite impressed with you, brother.
Bob doesn't say that often, so that's a big deal.
I'm sitting here in awe.
Look, man, just call all your friends in Yonkers. Tell them, come on.
I mean, I'm neither a Republican nor conservative.
Actually, he's a Yonkers resident, though.
I am. I'm neither a Republican nor conservative, but
we need all the votes.
Brother Pinion has been able to articulate the conservative philosophy, the underpinnings of Republican and conservative philosophy that many people are unaware of, and I was impressed when I saw him doing it online, and especially with the integrity, because you have appeared vis-a-vis, with a number of other Black Republican conservative commentators, and I have to say that they have not acquitted themselves nearly as well as you. So I think it's a real pleasure, brother.
But I'm happy to be here, and like I said, you are far too kind. But to kind of segue into why you said why I'm running, I think that I don't have to do this, right? And I'll start off by saying that life is pretty good. Right, I got the opportunity to go on national television, to do podcasts, to write op-eds about the things. I've been fortunate enough to be one of the national spokesmen for Republican.org with the energy initiative out of George Mason University, talking about climate change, talking about making sure that we're having a clean energy jobs, leveraging free market principles here in America, because America should be the leader in clean energy jobs here around the world. I've been able to go on, like I said, been able to go on CNN, been able to go on on TV One when Roland Martin, all these different opportunities that have been a true blessing. And so it was really great to be able to talk about the issues that I care about, the issues that are affecting my community, particularly communities of color. But it got to the point when you start looking around where you come from. I'm born and raised in Yonkers, lived in Yonkers my whole life, and the reality is that if we don't deal with some of these imminent threats to opportunity here in Yonkers today, we're not going to have the opportunity to fix them even 2 years from now. And so there are a lot of issues that when I looked at what was happening, that were imminent. When you're talking about school funding, when you start talking about how do we, even the taxation that we have here in Yonkers, where Yonkers pays more in taxes than Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse combined. All of these things that are potentially up for renegotiation in this and only this term. You couple that with the fact that my mother, who raised me, retired about 2 years ago. I'm the only child, and all of a sudden, I say you start getting these strange text messages in the middle of the night from a woman who can barely text, saying that I don't know how we're going to pay these property taxes, or I don't know if we're going to be able to stay here, or I think we're going to have to cut back on whatever because we have to find the resources to make sure that we have the long-term care bill for my grandmother who just turned 98 yesterday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to her. But so again, when I look at the things that are happening within my own family. And then juxtapose that what's happening for families all across Yonkers, and really all across Westchester, but particularly in Yonkers, because again, everything is on a bigger scale in Yonkers, because Yonkers is the largest city in Westchester, fourth largest city in the state.
Right.
It just became apparent to me that nobody was walking through that door. That we had an incumbent who had been there for the better part of 6 years, had failed to deliver any additional funding, not a single additional penny, in municipal aid for the city over that period of time. Was a bunch of issues that just really weren't being dealt with, and was really there unopposed. With many of the seats in Yonkers just being unopposed, and so to me, it felt that somebody had to step up. Somebody needed to present these issues, talk about the issues that were affecting people in Yonkers across ethnic lines, across racial lines, across socioeconomic boundaries, and just say that we're just not being treated fairly. And if we can start with that basic premise, understanding that Yonkers is not being treated fairly, then we can begin to solve the problem. And I think that we were dealing with a lot of individuals who either had held seats or are now currently running with seats, who either are unwilling to identify the problem or are also unwilling to hold the people who allowed us to get in that position responsible. And that was why, in a very roundabout way, how I arrived at the decision to say that, I think I must do this for my family and also for the city that I love.
Absolutely. Lorraine?
Are you going to have it? Do you have a primary?
No. So we are the only person on the Republican line and probably conservative line right now that's running. And so obviously we're going to have the opportunity to take our message to the people. I mean, again, I think our slogan is Believe in Yonkers. Our thesis is that Yonkers has invested in the state of New York. The state of New York has not invested in Yonkers. And I think that issue by issue, it doesn't matter how you approach it, you see that theme, that recurring theme rear its ugly head. When you talk about the fact that we have a casino that contributes more money to the state education fund than Mega Millions and Powerball combined, right? And yet we're literally 19th on the list of direct dollar recipients for those lottery payments, even though we're the fourth largest city. And again, we are the host of those things. The Empire Casino contributes more money than 6 of the 8 racinos combined to the state education fund. And yet again, we are handcuffed with this pittance of resources, getting 5%, while the state gets 80%. I think it's well documented. We had this annual recurring.
Wait, the city gets 5%.
As a host city, we're entitled to the 5% of the allocation. The state gets 80% of those resources. You have the surrounding counties that get about that get 5%, and you get the county that gets 10%. And so again, when you start looking at the fact that even this year, Yonkers is looking at anywhere on the combined municipal and school side to close to a $30 million budget deficit. Meanwhile the casino's spitting out about $23 million for us out of that 5% allocation. If we were getting 7.5%, getting 8%, just getting 10%, even to say that, hey, let's the city split the difference with the county. Let us get a larger lion's share of dollars that are originating in Yonkers. We wouldn't have these budget deficits. So again, issue by issue, you start saying that what people keep coming up with quote unquote formulas, but every single formula that they derive seems to find a way to give us less of the dollars that we are putting in.
Now we've dealt with homelessness a lot on the show. We had somebody. We had somebody who's from Yonkers, was a homelessness advocate who at the time was homeless herself and is not now.
Was Kate you're talking about?
Laura Case.
Yes,
she's actually written several articles on homelessness in Yonkers and homelessness in Westchester, and even educated me. There's a growing number of working homeless people that have 9-to-5 jobs. Their kids go to school every day, but they don't have a place to live, and they're living in shelters and stuff, which I didn't know existed.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And traditionally, Republicans in Westchester, one of the richest counties, don't like to acknowledge that we have a homelessness problem in Westchester.
Well, I'll take it a step further. I don't think it's a partisan issue. I think it's a bureaucratic issue. The dirty secret that we have here in Westchester is that the county of Westchester and the city of Yonkers have been engaged in what I call a secret, mutual non-aggression pact to basically get the homeless population of Westchester County and Yonkers to self-deport. Right, that is what we're talking about, zoning laws in Yonkers. You start talking about the laws on the books in Westchester that say that if you're a homeless person, that you have to literally be paying in to your actual care. When you start talking about how do you actually be able to be in a shelter, well, you have to be actually taking the money that you are actually making if you are one of those working homeless people and literally turning that money over to Westchester County, which makes absolutely zero sense, because the fastest way to get someone back on their feet is to allow them to keep the resources that they actually have coming in. If God willing, they're actually a self-sufficient member of the homeless population, to be able to say, how can I get you faster back into a home? How can I allow you to be able to get to work, to and fro, and be able to keep that job and not be able to be resource deficient? In Yonkers, we've had this kind of iteration of zoning laws that again have forced places that are in downtown Yonkers, which ironically, or you could say perniciously, also happens to be the place we're trying to redevelop, to all of a sudden be forced to cut the hours of homeless services because, okay, now we've done such redevelopment and zoning laws have changed so that homeless people cannot be in these areas from the hours of 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., right? So where are they going to go? You start talking about access to showers where, you have access to showers at the at the Yonkers bathhouse every Tuesday, except it's not every Tuesday, it's sporadically whenever they choose to have it on those Tuesdays.
One of the shelters didn't have showers. I know people were complaining they didn't have showers.
They don't have showers, right? Yeah. And then again, people are forced to go to this battle where they have the bathhouse. Well, guess what? The bathhouse, we all know, is literally about 1.5 miles from downtown, where all the bulk of the homeless people are. So you're asking people to literally do what? Hop on the 7 bus with the money they don't have to try to make it up to take a shower? Or you're talking about having people to try to push a shopping cart, 1.5 miles to a bathhouse on a Tuesday, only to find out that particular Tuesday it's not open. So again, I think that this is what we're talking about, and I think again, I always say that it's important for us to be able to focus on who is responsible for what aspect of your misery, right? And so what I mean by that is saying that we have a lot of politicians, particularly in Westchester, that spend their entire days and night pontificating about issues that actually they have zero purview over, right? They're sitting there talking about things in D.C. that you should be concerned about because it's impacting our lives. They're sitting here complaining about stuff that your congressman hasn't done. But let's be very clear. Your assemblyman has no authority over any gun laws in D.C. Your assemblyman has no purview or authority over anything that's being done in Albany with regards to Con Edison, right? So when I got to sit around and watch, my county executive and a whole bunch of county legislators sit around talking about Con Edison is terrible and hold 3-hour marathon sessions where they talk about they can bang on tables, when the reality is, my brothers and my sisters, you have absolutely no authority over this entity. And so why don't we focus on the things you actually do have control over? So that's my challenge right now in this election, to get people to understand that there are things that have not been done by the individuals who are responsible for doing them for you. And it's very easy to believe that they're doing their job because they spend their entire days and nights talking about things that you are opposed to, but yet they have no power to control.
I want to, Wow, you said a lot of stuff.
Now everyone knows why this brother is so well qualified. he fast, brother.
We try to use it as a form of education too. So a lot of people don't know what an assembly person does or is. So what is an assembly?
Right. And so, I always try to make the comparison that you have the New York State Legislature, which is responsible for the laws of the state and the funding of the state, right? Collectively, we call that governance. But, basically, you sign off on the laws and you sign off on how things get paid at the state level. You have, the state Senate is to the U.S. Senate as the Assembly is to the House of Representatives in D.C., right?
So that's a good example.
Right, as an example, right? We have a governor, the country has a president. We have state senators, the country has U.S. senators. We have Congress, we have state Assembly members, the U.S. government has congressmen and congresswomen, right? So that is kind of the composition, right? That I have the opportunity to represent 130,000 constituents in Yonkers for the ability to advocate effectively for how things get paid for and what portion of the allotment of those dollars, comes back to Yonkers. The opportunity to say that there are laws that we have here in Yonkers that from everything from healthcare to gun laws to, to how do we fund our schools, to making sure that, are we going to have facilities for homeless people? Are we going to anything that you could think of that relates to the people? Those are the things that you can do at the state legislature level.
To answer a question, Brenda L. Crump, she's our resident. She holds us down. Anytime we talked about Laura Case, she put Laura Case's author box from Black Westchester with a link, and we talked about the book that the young man was talking about. She put the link up. She asked to say your name again. Is Joe or Joseph Pinion?
So it's Joe Pinion, as in opinion without the L, basically. So it's just
There you go. I was gonna read from the thing, but you just
P-I-N-I-O-N. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And she's gonna probably look something up and post it in a minute because that's what she does. Bob, any questions?
So, Joe, like most Republicans, you take the position that one of the primary the primary solution for many of the problems that we face is a return to free market principles.
Right.
And with respect to something like housing.
Right.
Well, for one, and you're not at all unfamiliar with this, those who identify themselves as progressives would argue that one of the real root causes of many of the problems that we're having is the ordinary operations of the capitalist system.
Right.
But I'd like to ask you, what do you think is the primary threat to the proper operations of free market principles in the city of Yonkers, and how is that undermining our ability to solve problems like the homeless problem that we were
I think that, I take a step back. I think that when you start talking about partisan ideology, conservative, liberal, all those things, I think that in many ways, 9 out of 10 times, you're talking about a national message. Right now, the issues that are affecting Yonkers are not partisan. Right, we're talking about decades of mismanagement. I often say, the issues that have plagued Yonkers for literally my entire life. We're talking about the last 35 years. We've gone from one Governor Cuomo to the next, with a Republican governor in between. It doesn't seem to matter. Perpetually, Yonkers gets the short end of the stick.
Yes.
That is just what happens.
Yep.
And so, at some point, as a people, irrespective of your political sensibilities, you have to take a step back and say, how is this happening? Right? How is it that in Yonkers you've had a, not to pile on, because again, like I said, it's not partisan, but if we're talking about just the balls and strikes, we've had a rock solid Democratic delegation in Yonkers, going back the last 12 years. You're talking about the fact that in that time period, we've had Shelley Meyer, who is a wonderful woman. I've done a lot of work with her. She's gotten now a promotion and a raise. You've had Andrea Stewart-Cousins, who everyone loves, has gotten a promotion and a raise. George Latimer has gotten a promotion and a raise. And Yonkers has literally not gotten a single additional dime in municipal aid. That is just the facts. These are facts. These are not opinions. These are facts, right? And so when you start looking at it from that standpoint, when you start looking at the fact that we've got fire unions, teacher unions, and police unions that have given close to combined, when you add in the dollars they've given from their unions and actual personal donations from members of those unions, close to $250,000 to politicians in Yonkers that have been unopposed, have had no opponents, right? And literally as of Thursday night at midnight went to bed facing pink slips. I don't care where you're from. Where I'm from, we call that a con, right? And so on some basic level, this is not about, there's no Republican or Democratic way to make sure that Yonkers gets more than 70 cents on the dollar to make sure that we can build new schools. There's no Republican or Democratic way to make sure that Yonkers can say, my goodness, how is it possible that, again, we had a federal lawsuit that came here in 1980 that said that we had segregation in our public schools, segregation in our public housing, right? And the compromise for that was to levy a personal income tax on the people of Yonkers in 1984. And you go from 1984 to present, my entire life, we still have budget deficits year after year after year, and our schools are more segregated today than they were when the federal government sued us. So clearly these things are not working, right? And so again, I say that's not partisan. Right, that has nothing to do with the letter next to your name. That has everything to do with the zip code in which you live. And if we as a city can just get together to understand that we have not been treated fairly, and these individuals that we keep electing allow you to not be treated fairly and have not advocated effectively on your behalf, irrespective of their intent. At some point, when you've been there for 10 years or whether you've been there for an extended period of time and the results aren't there, you have to acknowledge the fact that the job hasn't gotten done.
Now, are you... with the current administration in the White House, there seems to be somewhat of a blue wave that they're calling it going around. Do you and the Westchester Democratic County Chair Reginald Lafayette likes to throw the facts that I think Democrats outnumber Republicans 2-1 or better or something like that. Right. Are you concerned about that in your it's an uphill battle and you run it?
No.
Okay.
The reality is, if you're looking at it from a statistical standpoint, Rob Astorino won my district last year, in spite of the fact that there was a blue wave that basically, washed him out of office. Every single person in Yonkers who was a Republican on the ballot won my district. Whatever portion of the district overlapped with my district. The fact of the matter also is that when we talk about the blue wave, we're talking about the rest of Westchester. We're talking about 3-car garage Westchester. Right, Yonkers is not 3-car garage Westchester. Yonkers is a 1-car garage with too many cars to fit in the driveway. Right, that is what we're dealing with in Yonkers. And these individuals, my neighbors, the people that I talk to every day, literally cannot afford to send a national message at the expense of their local needs. We have eminent, dire needs right now. When I talk about trying to make sure that we can sunset the personal income tax in Yonkers, which went into effect in 1984, people don't realize that that had a sunset date. That sunset date was 35 years. 35 years is 2019. We have an opportunity, if we have leaders with courage, to go to Albany and said, we need you to do what you said you were going to do when you said it, which is to let that tax die because it has not produced the results that you thought it was going to.
I'm sorry, allow me to interject and ask you to clarify, please, for us, because it's not evident to me precisely what tax you're talking about. Can you just tell us, is that the city?
So Yonkers quietly has a personal income tax that exists literally nowhere else in the entire state outside of the 5 boroughs, right? So you go on, that's why you go on TurboTax today. They ask you if you're going to file your taxes. First question they're going to ask you is, have you lived in Yonkers, right? Because again, if you live in Yonkers or you're an employee in Yonkers, there is a Yonkers personal income tax that comes out of your taxes, right? And that is a tax that was a compromise. Again, when we had that federal lawsuit, the state would give us $10 million, whatever that was supposed to do, because I don't know how you fix 40 years of systemic inequality with a $10 million check. And then on the flip side of that was that for the next 35 years, the state would give Yonkers the statutory authority to literally tax the people of Yonkers, to basically tell us to make like Jesus and heal ourselves, right? And I don't care who you're talking to. The reality is that at the end of the day, nowhere in history have you ever healed society by asking people with little to actually fix the gap that they don't have by taking more money out of their pockets.
Absolutely.
So this was an income tax that was instituted with the permission of the state in order to allow the city of Yonkers to address some of the public policy challenges that they faced during the 1980s.
Correct. The powers that be decided that we'll write you a check for $10 million. Additionally, will allow you to levy this personal income tax. What people don't realize, the most pernicious part about this tax is that when we talk about the fact that Yonkers is underfunded, the fact that Buffalo and Rochester get 98% reimbursements on capital investments and the Yonkers only gets 70%. What people don't realize is that part of the justification that the state uses to underfund us is the revenue brought in by the personal income tax. So they give us the statutory authority to levy a tax. And then they point to the revenue that that tax brings in and says, that is why we don't need to fund you at a greater level. And so again, even though we're paying more and more and more, even though the city is basically now at, well, over 90% of the constitutional limit, because we just busted the tax cap again, because the governor did us a favor to give us $8.8 million, or however many millions of dollars he gave us to fill the gap on the school side, even though, again, that's our money. Right, this is not, you're not doing us a favor, right? If I take $10 out of your right pocket and I put $7 back in your left pocket, you didn't give me any money, right? It's my money, right? And so that's the issue that we're dealing with here in Yonkers, is getting people to understand that. I understand it's very easy to continue to go to the polls and say, my daddy was a Republican, his daddy before him was a Republican, I'm going to vote for the Republican. My mama was a Democrat, my daddy's a Democrat, I'm a Democrat, I'm going to vote for the Democrat. But that is not working. It hasn't worked. And so at this point, we just need to sit down and say, what are the issues facing our city? Who recognizes the issues facing our city? Who is responsible for having those things come to be? And who is going to have the courage to stand up and say enough is enough?
Sandy Barnaby from the Anti-Racism Alliance said, great line. How do you fix 30 years of systemic equality with the $10 million inequality with the $10 million check? She liked that. Yeah. So it's just comment. And I know about being underfunded as a resident and born in Mount Vernon. So
we in the same boat.
Yeah, so we know Mount Vernon has been traditionally underfunded, and we don't get our share of a lot of the stuff you're talking. Like we have the same issue there.
Right.
Yeah. And we're also the dumping ground of the county when they want to put their poor and the people that they don't want in the other municipalities, they get dumped in Yonkers and Mount Vernon.
Yep.
Yeah. So
it's just, it's unfathomable how these things keep happening year after year after year after year. But again, on some base level, the fine print is because we allow it. And that's the apathy that comes along with unopposed elections.
Right. Dr. Bob, last question. You had a question, right? Comment?
I did. Is the last question?
Well, we're going to give him a chance to do his how you could get in touch with him, his last words, and all that other stuff.
Okay. So, Joseph, I know you are synthesizing complex strands of thought and analysis in your comments about policy proposals, but I found something curious in what you just said. On the one hand, you have, I think, rightly suggested that the city of Yonkers is suffering from some sort of budgetary shortfall.
Yes.
That has in fact now endangered the school system amongst other municipal services.
Correct.
But on the other hand, you also are advocating for the elimination of this personal income tax that the city was allowed to impose as a way of bringing in greater revenue. And so it sounds to me like you, if we eliminate the tax, like you propose,
so I mean,
then
so that's what everyone says,
that's
right? That's what happened. Where the system becomes reliant on toxicity, right? You can be addicted to heroin, and it's also at that point dangerous for you to stop taking heroin, right? Your body has developed a physical dependency that if you stop, you will die, right? That is the chemical reality of dependency. Yonkers has a dependency on toxic taxation. Right, that is what we're dealing with. And so, yes, in a binary situation where yesterday we had the tax, tomorrow we don't have the tax, yes, that could be a situation where if nothing else changes, then yes, we would have some dire problems. But the fact remains is the reason that nothing changes is because of the tax. In part.
Okay.
Right.
So let me put the question to you.
Yes.
What would you want to see changed if that tax was eliminated? How would the city still manage to make efficient use of its resources and address some of the
Here we go. All right. So we got a few things, right? So you're looking at a situation where we have this personal income tax. Obviously, if that goes away, people say, "Oh, where's the money come from?" Well, look, the money doesn't just vanish in thin air, right? It's almost like when people say, "Well, what happens to all those money after a drug bust?" Right? The police don't burn it; they don't put it in the furnace and light it on fire, right? We're sitting here in a situation, we're saying that money goes back into the pockets of the people who live in Yonkers, right? That is people who are buying bread in Yonkers, people who are buying beer in Yonkers. That's the reality, is that Yonkers is not a sleepy vacation town. The people that live in Yonkers spend the most money in Yonkers. That is just our reality. So from that standpoint, it is a stimulus for the people of Yonkers. It's also, again, when you start talking about why are foreclosures up in Yonkers, it's because people don't have the money in their bank account to pay the bank. Why the fact that people's hedges aren't trimmed is because people don't have the money in the bank to pay the gardener. Like, these are the realities that people are dealing with. So again, putting that money back in people's pockets helps to create a broader, a more vast situation for the people in Yonkers. From a government standpoint, when you start talking about what needs to happen, well, now look, that tax base that you were losing to justify not giving us our fair share of our very own dollars is gone, right? And so now the state has to do something different, right? You can look at from a simple standpoint of, in this state, the state of New York pays property taxes on 90% of the land that it owns across the entire state. You go to places like Austin, that's close to $13 million, you know, where dollars are just flowing in all over the place. You've got a situation where we've got marshland in New York State, where it literally is unusable, not just in the present, but possibly for decades into the future. The state pays millions of dollars in property taxes on. In Westchester County, it pays property taxes on 80 acres, 89 acres, I'm sorry, I'm off. 89 acres in Westchester County, of close to, you know, nearly 7,000 acres, 89. In Yonkers, we have 450 acres of state-owned land where the state pays 0 property taxes on any of those acres. And so again, when I come back to our central theme that, again, Yonkers has invested in New York, but New York is not invested in Yonkers. Again, they find ways to take money out of Yonkers, but they do not replenish or do not even give us what they give to everybody else. And so to your point about saying, okay, well, the money's going to be gone, what then? What then? Yes, we need to get to the what then. We need to get to the point where we're saying you're paying property taxes on practically every other county across the state. Where is our just due? We get to the standpoint where we're saying that you are literally taking money out of our city to fund opportunity for children all around this state. We have in New York State something called the Hold Harmless provision. That Hold Harmless provision basically states that no school district can receive less money one year than they did the previous year. That sounds simple, it sounds harmless, but it's not. It has a devastating effect on places like Yonkers, which is the fastest growing school district in the state outside of New York City, at a time when over the last 5 years, high school enrollment is down 6%, right? And so you have dollars that are literally locked in districts that there are no longer students there. Districts down 15% in enrollment, 10% in enrollment, 25% in enrollment, and the dollars are stuck there because of a whole harmless provision that won't let them follow the students. We're saying, look, we can allow those dollars to follow the students. We have a rise in enrollment here in Yonkers. Let those dollars follow those students, right? There are simple things that I can do. Every single politician that walks in here, that has the courage to walk in here and talk to you, is going to say, I want fair funding for Yonkers. Every single one of them. Every person in Westchester is going to walk through this door, they're going to say, I want fair funding for Westchester. They don't know how to do it. They're not being serious about it. And so to me, the reality is there are things that we can do irrespective, even if you get to the point where I say, I can't actually change the formula. I can't get us more than 70%, or I can only get us up to 75% or 80%. There are things you can do in a bipartisan manner to go to the other similarly affected districts, to say that there are over 250 districts in this state that have exceeded their target range for aid, and that we can go to those other districts of people in the Assembly, in the Senate, who are victims like Yonkers, but on a smaller basis, and saying that your children are being getting the short end of the stick. And these are things that we can do to work together to make sure that those dollars follow the students. And if things like that start happening, if we can get the state to start doing what they do for everybody else, to pay property taxes on the land that they own, that's how you start dealing with that dollars, the actual dollar figure that wasn't going to be there from the tax income. But it's also a way that you can just start across the board having equity and parity for the people who live in Yonkers to not only have the money that they've made, they've worked hard for in their pockets to take care of their daily needs, but also the municipal dollars and the aid we require to make sure that we can build new schools and have a better world.
Sandy Barnaby was asking, she said, state pays 0 property taxes? I'm not clear. How can the state pay property taxes to other counties but not Westchester?
It's amazing, but yet the state pays property taxes on 89 acres in Westchester County. That is it.
And how many acres does it hold, Joe?
7,000 acres of state-owned land that are here in Westchester County.
And how much of that is Yonkers again?
450 acres in Yonkers.
Well, okay.
So the state has a considerable exemption of the on taxes
Again, they pay property taxes on 90% of the land they own across the state. They pay property taxes on 0% of the land they own in Yonkers. So you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that, again, we're getting shortchanged.
For those who's listening to you, wait, for those, I want to get this in before we run out of time. Before those listening to you, they want to know more about you. They want to know how to reach you, how they can give to you. What's your social media, websites?
So you can go to joepinion.com. That's Joe Pinion, like opinion without the O, .com. You can find out a little bit more about me. We have on our website, it's called Talk to Joe. You can click there. You can make a time to talk to me or email me, and we'll set it up. I'm here to answer literally every question that our constituents have, because ultimately this election is too important. You can find us on social media at Pinion4NY. Across Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. My personal account is Joseph Pinion, the full government on Twitter, and you can find me on Instagram personally at I am Joe Pinion.
Okay, so Joe, you think one of the ways to make up for, to address the financial crisis that the city of Yonkers is facing is to eliminate the personal tax burden, but insist that the state provide the city with its rightful share of state revenues.
The basic thing is the state needs to treat Yonkers fairly. The state needs to treat Yonkers the way it treats everybody else. And the reality is we've had a litany of politicians that seem to be in the go with the flow. They seem to think that some money is better than no money. And the reality is we just need to be treated fairly and equitably. And it has not happened literally my entire life. And in this election, we have one opportunity really to fix it. Again, that Yonkers personal income tax has a sunset date of 2019. It would have to be reauthorized. We have the opportunity to try to really get some work done and move forward here.
Joe, I want to ask you just to make clear for us why you think this particular upcoming election is so critical for addressing the kind of challenges that the city. It seems like you.
Right.
This is kind of.
Yeah, I mean, look. Again, what we start with that tax. I mean, again, if they reauthorize it for another 35 years, that's a lifetime. That's literally my entire lifetime. We go from 1984 to now. That is my lifetime. They reauthorize it for another 35 years. Who knows if I'm even going to be around?
I pay that tax, by the way.
So I mean, that's the reality. When you start talking about the fact that, again, we're seeing changes now in the way that gambling is dealt with across this state. The full gambling moratorium is going to be up. There was a 7-year moratorium on full gambling across the state, a basic freeze on full gambling. That's going to be upcoming. So if you start talking about what's going to happen between now and 2020, the conversations about how do we begin to start deciding which casinos or which racinos are going to be approved for that conversation is going to be starting now. Currently, we have an individual who represents part of Yonkers who sits on that gaming commission, and I think, unfortunately, he's been there so long he's forgotten that he works for the people of Yonkers, not the state. And that what's in the best interest of Yonkers is actually what's in the best interest of his constituents. I
got one last, because I want to get more questions.
Yes.
We haven't talked about it much. Brenda L. Crump, who was a former Mount Vernon school board trustee.
Yes.
She said, what are your views regarding public charter schools? Money follow the student statement. Sounds like Joe might support public charter schools.
Well, look, here's the thing. We had this thing right now. Yonkers doesn't have a charter school problem. I just like to say that. I know it's not a popular opinion to have, but the reality is we have about 680 students that attend a charter school in Yonkers. There are 27,000 students that attend Yonkers public schools. The reality is, again, I don't care if you're a black, brown, son of Italy, daughter of Sligo. If you're a student in Yonkers, the greatest threat is not a charter school to your education. The greatest threat are politicians in Albany who won't fully fund you. So again, if you're talking about, I understand that there is a reality that, to me, also Republicans don't talk about a lot, which is that at a certain point there becomes a tipping point where there are too many charter schools that the startup cost of those charter schools actually undermines the maintenance cost of your public school system. That is true. That is an economic, financial reality that does not get talked about. That is not a financial reality in Yonkers right now. The financial reality that we have right now, while we were talking about having to possibly lay off, close to 200 and over 250 school personnel, was because of the fact that we simply haven't gotten the resources that we deserve. And I think, to me, if we can focus on those issues and not focusing on issues that, get people, kind of inflamed and saying, oh, well, this person has this ideology. This is not an ideological battle. This is a battle for making sure that Yonkers gets its just due.
Okay. Lorraine, did you have any last questions? Or?
Yeah, I have a question, which it's probably more of a CNN question or a national question.
We want some national questions. This brother needed it.
The schools are growing in Yonkers. Yep. The amount of children and the majority, I would say 80% of that is immigrants that are born in Yonkers. Yonkers has thousands of immigrant families living here now, most of them in fear. But the question I have for you is, what do you personally think about the zero tolerance
immigration policy?
Immigration policy that President Trump just put out there, and is separating the families of immigrant children. I mean, we have, in the last month and a half, 2,000 children are being separated from their parents, especially a day like today, Father's Day, and they're putting numbers on them. They're putting numbers on their sleeves and on their chests to identify who they are, like a concentration camp.
Yeah, I mean, it's an abomination. I think that at the end of the day, we are a nation of laws, but we also have a responsibility to reflect the spirit of those laws and also the spirit of humanity. It is, to me, inhumane to try to rip children out of the arms of their families. It's also inhumane to think that somehow it's more humane to think that, oh, well, maybe if we just all put them in a cell together, that's a better alternative. I mean, this is just, it's lunacy, right? It's ideology on steroids, and it needs to end. So to me, I think it's sad that we've reached a point in society where somehow we can talk about issues in such stark terms that the humanity of those involved gets lost. Having said that, again, like I said, for me at the local level, these aren't necessarily things that you get to deal with as an assembly person. And so again, even I have some opponents who are always literally their entire campaign seems to be either Donald Trump or the Supreme Court or things of that nature. And again, these are important issues. But the fact remains, we got a primary election next week or this coming week for Congress. If people want to talk about those issues, that's where they lie. And so that's my thing, to be able to, we should be able as a society, as Joe, private citizen, to be able to come here on Black Westchester and talk about the issues that are literally ripping our communities of color apart. But then as it pertains to what we can do at the local level, I think, again, my challenge, and one of the things, irrespective of my decision to run for this office, was to get people to understand of who to go with your pain, right? Understand that who can do what for you. And once we understand who can do what for us, then we can start leveraging the political process to have better outcomes for our people.
You got a thumbs up from White Plains Common Council, Nadine Hunt Robinson. She gave you a thumbs up. So last words, anything I didn't ask you. And I want to say there are other questions, and you said you had a thing on your website where you can they can make a time to talk to you, so
no,
they can ask you directly.
I'll try to see if we can go through at the end and go through the feed to see if we can answer any of those questions as well.
Okay.
But yeah, like I said, obviously, thank you so much for having me on here. Hope to come back, sometime before the campaign's over, as we go through the summer, because again, I mean, there's so many issues that need to be talked about. Like I said, 24% of the children that live in Yonkers live in poverty. We've got 78% of the kids in Yonkers public schools that can't afford lunch. Right, and the overwhelming majority of these children are Black and brown students. Right, like I said, we've gone from a point where we were sued in 1980, because of segregation in our public schools. Fast forward today, we've got 76% of the children that are attending Yonkers public schools are Black and brown students. Mm-hmm. Right, so when you start talking about that fact, and start talking about the fact that what are we really achieving? Right, we're spending over $30 million a year moving children around to create racially diverse schools that, statistically speaking, can't be created. Right, we statistically speaking cannot create racially diverse schools, and it's deeper than that, because I know we want to have economically diverse schools as well. But we don't live in the perfect world. We live in the real world, and in the real world, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're just having the best possible schools for all of our students, and making sure that those schools, irrespective of their creed, are able to prepare them for the best possible life outcomes.
Okay.
Do you have any debates coming up with NADA?
I don't know. I mean, I made the remark the other day that, I mean, they're taking a lot of pictures over there. It's curious. I actually had to ask somebody and pinch myself to see if I missed the election, and he already got elected.
Well, I want to make an offer I would like to invite both of y'all back on for an informal, debate where people can see both of y'all, answering questions. So I would like to, see if we can set that up.
And I know that. I mean, I also know there's Anthony Nicodemo, who's also running for that seat. And again, I think, to me, it's important for people to get the full spectrum of views. Because again, like I said, this election is too important. We're talking about the next 35 years in Yonkers.
Well, since they're still determining with their primary, so after they have a primary and we have an actual candidate, then that candidate and you.
It's typical. I mean, I actually ran into him at the Ukrainian Fest. I think we might end up having a three-way race ourselves here in Yonkers. So, who really knows? But we'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, again, I invite you to definitely.
But I'm more than happy to be
back.
Please,
yes, come back.
Please,
you got to come back.
We like to have you discuss, win or lose, just come and discuss the issues. This is what we do here. You know what I'm saying? And
absolutely.
When we get somebody who can articulate the issues and break it down, we definitely have to have you come back.
No, I appreciate it. Like I said, it's a blessing to be here and doing this work. I was on Warburton the other day. I saw a brother. He's like, I know you, and I was like, oh well, you maybe saw me on. My grandmother called it the Don Lemon, right? So
I love that man.
I don't know, y'all didn't notice that.
Yeah, so my grandma's like, I saw you. He's like, no,
this ain't this brother.
He's like, I saw you on TV while I'm rolling. So I think it's important that when we have outlets, to talk about, in great detail, with specificity, what happens to communities of color. It's important for us to. To be able to leverage that and talk about it and to amplify those voices. So I appreciate the work you guys do here, and thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. And Brenda has posted links to all your social media and articles as you have written. It's all in the feed. So everybody, the sites, the pages, that's what she does. She points all of that. Sandy Barnaby said, thank you. Speak out and organize to stop this. That was what her comment was. And we got 2 minutes. Unless you're going to ask a question,
no,
30
it's not a
seconds
question.
or less.
It's not a question. I want to amplify a point that is implied in some of Joe's comments, and that is that the lack of party competition in communities of color throughout the United States that have been dominated overwhelmingly by Democrats, I think, does do a tremendous disservice to our ability to forge new solutions. If we go back historically, the Democratic Party dominated politics in the South for centuries during the antebellum period and post-antebellum period. And most commentators have concluded that that was harmful to the formulation of policies that serve the interests of people of color in the South. And the same kind of point, I know I've tried to make the same kind of point in a lot of my proposals to start alternative political formations to the Democratic Party in Mount Vernon, because I do think it's the case that without competition, our party leaders have gotten comfortable and they have grown complacent and have rested on their laurels, and a lot of problems have festered without anyone really looking for solutions.
Yep.
I mean, even
in that sense, I think.
Yeah, I mean, even here in Yonkers, I mean, look, again, Shelley's a great person, but all of a sudden, she decided she wanted to be a state senator. She had an actual competition for that special election. Next thing you know, we got $250,000 over here for an elevator. We've got laws being funded for gun violence prevention upstate. We have Congressman Elliot Engel, who's been there literally my entire life in D.C. All of a sudden, he's got
an actual, next week.
Yeah, he had a primary opponent, and next thing you know, all of a sudden, I saw push alert on my phone, $10 million for Westchester. I said, my goodness. All it took was a halfway decent primary challenge, and suddenly, dollars start flowing. It's amazing what happens when people's actual personal veracity is on the line. And so, to me, I think it's important for us as a community to say, who is talking about the issues that are going to impact our communities positively, and making sure that people are actually earning our vote and earning our trust.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, we applaud you. Thank you for coming.
No, I appreciate it.
Black Republicans is not something we see often. So it's just like,
they're not that uncommon.
But I'm just saying, it's just not, you don't see the term, because traditionally, and I'm not a Democrat or a Republican, but I'm independent. Like, you know what I'm saying? And I vote for the best candidate. And even when I was a registered Democrat, I still felt that. And I don't believe in party slates, because I think some weaker candidates get in for being on a slate.
Yep. And
I think we should pick the best person for each seat. So regardless of party affiliation, I like to give people an opportunity to get to know the candidates and then hopefully they can make more informed selections at the ballot box.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? So that's what we're about. Again, so that saying Republicans don't have to fear coming on here because, they're told not to come on here, a lot of them.
Well, I mean,
like we've had one Republican said he was told not to come.
I mean,
don't go over there.
I mean, the reality is, like I said, Malcolm X always said, sincerity is my credential. And I think the reality is that we've got a lot of people, in politics who lack the sincerity for their outrage or their concern to be deemed credible. I've tried to maintain and said, look, first and foremost, my priority is to make sure that my community is taken care of. And how you advocate for your community, there is no one way to do that, right? There's a blueprint of how we move forward as a people, and we've done it. And so it's about replicating that blueprint irrespective of your political sensibilities.
I wanted to shout out the few people that we didn't get to. Nadine Hunt Robinson, I said she's on. Wilson Terrero joined in. Charlie Khalil joined in. I'm not sure if I missed anybody else's name. If I did, I apologize. But as always, you are listening to Black Westchester presents the People Before Politics radio show every Sunday, 6 to 8 on InTheMixRadio.com. The June issue is out right now. If it's not, we're going to try to fill some of the spots that it ran out. We're running out everywhere it is right now. We're working on the July issue. You still have less than a week if you want to advertise for the July issue. You still have about less than a week. Hit us at advertise with bw@gmail.com. We're also taking ads for our anniversary issue. Our 1-year anniversary issue is August. We got a lot of spots there. They're running through them quickly. And the 4-year anniversary of People Before Politics is the first week in August. And as we did with the 100th episode, we're taking sponsors. So, we're going to get a commemorative T-shirt and all that stuff. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, please hit us, advertise with BW. As always, you could have been doing anything, but you chose to ride with us, and we greatly appreciate this. My partner, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there and all the men taking care of somebody else's kids. Are you a father? I didn't ask you. Are you a father?
No, I am not.
Okay.
Gotta get married first.
Okay. Well, ladies, that's another thing. Ladies, he's unmarried. See? Okay, there you go. So anyway, I would like to let my co-host, the lovely Lorraine Lopez, Dr. Bob, a.k.a. Biff Baskerville. Thank you for participating. Happy Father's Day. And see you next week. We're supposed to have Congressman Ingle on the show. And after that, the next week is Clive Isley, former Mount Vernon commissioner, who will be talking about the state of the Mount Vernon Police Department. So that's definitely going to be a show you do not want to miss. With that said, we're out. Peace.
2 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. Any minority that has a block of votes that stick together